let me just say at the top, I have no idea why I agreed to do this, but Gerry, I trust you. I've known you for years, so you're just gonna make this happen. I'm gonna wait here. Check this out. This is our wait. Watch this. Just.
Welcome to Full Thread.
Yeah, exactly. But no, Gerry Fialka, I've known you for years. You did this film festival, which I thought was brilliant back in the day. Are you still doing it? That film festival, the Pixel Bliss?
Pixel Bliss just celebrated our 30th year. You gave us free want ads in early issues of Film Threat, and you put us in your book, and we're super honored. So here we go. Yeah. I'm reversing. It's the fourth step of McLuhan's tetrad. If you press to an extreme, what does it flip into? I'm hijacking Chris Gore's Film Threat livecast, and I'm going to interview him. And it's a real honor and a pleasure, Chris Gore, to be with you. My name is Gerry Fialka, and it's December 15th, 2020. The first question, Chris, is what's the best thing for a human being?
Wow. Here's what I'll say, what I've learned, because I'm older now. And here, the best thing is and I've had this conversation with many people because I believe that this is the pathway to true happiness is purpose.
Yeah.
I believe that purpose is your guiding light. I believe that the reason I've been doing Film Threat now 35 plus years is because that has been my purpose, is to champion the independent films and the new and emerging creative voices that don't even get accepted by places like, hey, Sundance, right? Like, so that purpose and having that as my guiding principle has kept me generally happy, for a thing that I started out of high school. So, and this is also with the exception of like, you've got, clean water, food, a good living. I will say this, I've also learned that when I've seen my friends who have become maybe more financially successful than I have become, I know that money doesn't mean that they're happier. I feel like it adds more complexity and just creates larger issues. And I'll say, when I even look back on my life, the times I was the most happy were the times when I didn't have a lot of money, because what it did is it took the focus into, rather than like acquiring material items, whatever. And I am surrounded in a room by all sorts of material items, toys and books and, all sorts of crazy stuff. Like I'm in this room. I know that when I haven't been able to purchase things, that almost like is like, it's almost like uplifting, like a burden. That's like, I don't have to work. Like, I'm not like, not only do I can't afford that, I don't need that.
Right. So let's move on.
Long-winded answer.
Really good. You covered it well. And the next question is what's your favorite form of information? How information comes into you?
I am a media junkie. And I will say this, at one point I subscribed to 50 magazines. I was a media junkie. There's no getting around that. But the way that I consume now is mostly through Audible and listening. So podcasts, I watch YouTube shows, but I tend to listen to them more than watch them in the commentators. I've listened to Howard Stern for years and been a subscriber to Sirius XM. And I listen to books. I recently listened to Dune. I've read that book like, God, so many times, probably 5-6 times now. I read it every year in high school. Then I'll probably read it. And then also like, I feel like just listening, right? Because I spend a lot of time on a computer and a device. So because of that, I find it exhausting. Like, I just don't need to do another thing looking at a device. I don't have a Kindle, right? Like I find, but I can listen to a book and do a project. So
that was perfect. So why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Oh, wow. Your questions are very good, Gerry.
Well, thank you.
You were not BSing about this.
No, you would keep it brief because you'll see a lot of the themes will come back around.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So why do you think humans collect information or gather it?
I would say to getting back to purpose, I think a lot of it comes to finding meaning, right? Why am I in this meat sleeve? You know, no, seriously, why is all this contained in a meat sleeve? Like what this very fragile meat sleeve, because if we don't get air, we're just dead.
Yeah.
If we are, aren't able to consume food or protein, we will be dead. We're very fragile beings.
Perfect.
So I believe that's why we're looking for what that meaning is. And that's for me, but it's weird. I go back and forth between, I like fiction, right? So, and this is in my Audible listening. It's like, I always bounce back and forth. Fiction, nonfiction. I'll read some work efficiency book like The 4-Hour Workweek or something, and then I'll, listen to a novel, right? And I just bounce back and forth between that. I do like biographies. I find them inspiring, biographies of comedians, historical figures. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was good because you're anticipating all the upcoming questions. You must have ESP. But the next question in regards to information is this need or want innate or invented for humans? Collecting information, is it innate? And of course it's both, and it depends, but it's more like, is it more innate or more invented, the need to collect information?
I'm not sure. I mean, I will say this, in modern society, I'll say that it's easier to do it now because, I grew up at a time where in order to get a movie that I wanted to see, I had to send an SASE, and I know you know what that is. It's a self-addressed stamped envelope, and I would send a self-addressed stamped envelope to some PO box in Florida. I'd receive back, 5-6 pages, with inscrutably small type, printed on both sides, listings of movies on VHS. Then what I would do is I would send a money order, a postal, which you could get at the post office or from a bank. And the money order was better than a check. It was guaranteed cash. It was effectively cash.
Yeah.
You would send that to the person, and generally the movies were, $20 each or 3 for $40 for VHS plus shipping, right? I'd send that, and then I would receive, foreign films that were unavailable in the United States, like bootlegs of movies that were unobtainable. And today we live in a time where within 2 clicks we can see anything, including movies that just opened in theaters. It doesn't mean that the quality is good. So it's kind of how you choose to consume it. In terms of collecting, I have always been a collector.
Yeah.
And I have saved every movie ticket stub for every movie I've seen since I was about 12 years old when I saw Star Wars for the first time. So, and I have them organized in category by, I went to this early screening, so I had a different type of ticket, or I had like these tickets that used to come out, like they look like little fat. So I have saved my physical tickets. Yeah. And up until recently, they would give you this thing where you could print out your ticket from a PDF, and I used to print them out. They're so ugly, I don't care. There's nothing about them. But one day I'd like to have a place that's large enough that I could get like a coffee table and have trays of the different types of ticket stubs that would be under a glass coffee table. IKEA sells something like that. So in any case, I don't know how much that addresses your question directly, but I think that, we collect not just information, but sort of streams of media that we consume, and we've become, for good or bad, consumers where we chew this stuff and eat it out so quickly. But where a big movie would come out and I'd be thinking about a Star Wars film for 3 years until the next Star Wars movie came out, now it's just, by the end of Friday after the preview screenings and the critics says, we've all consumed it, we've all digested it, there's outrage. I don't know how good this is. I don't know that there's not the time that's taken to, sit with a piece of art or an experience and digest it and what it means. I feel like there might be too much of it. And I'm not, that's not a complaint in the sense that I grew up at a time where there might have been 3 or 4 genre movies that opened in a year, with the exclusion of maybe horror films, which were very prevalent. But, you know, a movie would come out and be like The Black Hole or Blade Runner, and it'd be the one of the 4 or 5 science fiction movies that would open in a year. Now it's 10 Star Wars series, you know, which I think, whatever, that's fine. But there's something, the scarcity of it made it more precious to me.
Chris, what you're touching on is what this series is about. You're doing media archaeology and anthropology, how humans' inventions shape our behavior. And then you don't take a point of view. In your lonely teenage room, you can go, I hate Facebook or I love it. But when you study it in a big, broad way that you're doing a comprehensivist, you're saying it has services and disservices. So you get in the big picture. So that's why my questions are ironically biased sometimes. What do you pursue more, happiness or meaning?
Wow. First of all, I think happiness is a luxury. And I think it's, in some ways I've learned is a choice. But meaning is probably what I seek out more. I think that people sort of put too much emphasis on, well, I just want to be happy, or I just want you to be happy. And I think the thing that having children really taught me, I have grown children that are in their 20s, and I'm proud to say that I raised them in Los Angeles and they're not assholes. So
beautiful.
Very much a challenge. It's a challenge to, you know, get them to avoid the things that would be, you know, take them down paths that would not be in their best interest. But the one thing that I learned from that experience raising kids and changing diapers, we didn't use disposable ones. We used the Diety diaper service. In fact, I still have a couple of my kids' cloth diapers. They're so great for waxing cars because they're so soft. I'm serious. I still have some of the diapers my kids had, and I still use them to buff my car. But the thing that I learned is that I feel like it's sort of overrated. Like, I want to do what I want to do. Like, when my kids were young, I like, it didn't matter to me, you know, like whether or not I wanted to like get sleep. It's like, I wanted to get up at like 2 a.m. and change their diaper. Like, I wanted to go and do all these things that other people would be like, oh my God, that seems like such obligation, but that brought me joy, right? So those sacrifices actually taught me a lot. And I believe that sacrifice, which I think is not a virtue that's praised all that much these days, is how you achieve anything. And I do think it's important to, I think it's important that whatever sacrifice you're making, whether it's like, I'd really like to go out tonight, but I'm going to spend X amount of time on this thing, or I'd really prefer to do this, but whatever. Like, I don't see a lot of that. I see a lot of people taking the quick pathways to what is perceived success. And
Chris, you've done this well. You've defined purpose early on, and you've fulfilled your pursuit of that. So can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them, just briefly?
Yeah. One of my earliest memories was seeing the movie, and so much of my life is defined by a movie, an experience. But I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey at the age of 5 at a retrospective screening. It was a retrospective screening. My dad took me, you know, the movie had already been through its theatrical run in the 60s. And it came to theaters and like sort of a retrospective. And he took me to see it as a kid, and it blew my mind for a very odd reason, which I think you will probably never guess. And that's that one of the characters in the movie went to the bathroom. And this blew my mind. And I'll tell you because I remember arguing with my family whenever we'd have, you know, movies when they were on television were events back then.
Yes.
You know, Planet of the Apes, Gone with the Wind, West Side Story, The Wizard of Oz. These were events. Like, we knew it was like the Sunday night movie, right? And it was like, we're getting popcorn, we're all sitting down, we're having this shared experience, which is so we have so few shared experiences today, which I feel is sort of the splintering of our culture. Unfortunately, it's resulted in that. Like there are more genres of music than you could name. There are more outlets covering movies than movies made in a year, right? Like everything is splintered into these little, like, I have found my tribe and here it is, quiver. Okay, that's great, but the shared experiences I think are very meaningful. In any case, so I'm sure you remember that, like a Sunday night movie is a big thing. And I remember getting very upset after watching The Wizard of Oz. I'm like, this movie is not real.
Yeah.
To me, a validation is an experience, if it wasn't real, was false and I was being lied to.
Wow.
Okay, the reason I knew The Wizard of Oz was not real was because no one in the movie ever stopped to go to the bathroom. We never saw it. So I thought it was bullshit. I thought this movie is a lie. And then every movie that was the standard, was just like, they don't go to the bathroom in the movie. Now I'm like 3 or 4 years old. My family thought this was funny, right? So then I finally saw 2001: A Space Odyssey, and you recall the scene where Dr. Floyd goes to and there's these instructions, and you can find those instructions actually exist if you research online. Stanley Kubrick was notoriously detail oriented, and all of those instructions are absolutely, scientifically correct. And it blew my mind, like, oh my God, a character went to the bathroom. This is real. And then of course that psychedelic drug fueled ending, made it all the more terrifying to a 5-year-old. And then I began to notice other movies where characters went to the bathroom. And you'd be surprised, in Eyes Wide Shut, Nicole Kidman takes a tinkle in front of Tom Cruise. And I will say this, so I began to notice, and not only that, this is not like a weird fetishized sexual obsession. There are websites that will keep track of this. So, but I did learn that the actor who has gone to the bathroom most in a film where it's part of the story, you would never guess.
Tell me.
Tom Hanks.
Wow.
In The Green Mile, it's a plot point.
With that, you did enough on that. That is brilliant.
He did a urinary tract infection. In Castaway. He goes to the bathroom during his ill-fated flight. Right. In Forrest Gump, he says, "I gotta pee." It's not the only one. So in any case, that's probably my earliest memory, was arguing with my family that movies weren't real because no one ever went to the bathroom in a movie.
Yeah. Now a quick 2 anecdotes before we go to the second question about memory is Stanley Kubrick said he made 2001 to convolate Marshall McLuhan. He invited McLuhan to the pre-release screening in New York. McLuhan fell asleep after 10 minutes. It's a great story. I'm not going to go into details. The other thing is I'm in the process of making my second feature, which is a remake of the prequel to 2001, which doesn't exist. So now the question about memory, I thought you'd get a kick out of both of those.
I love that. Well, I've read the novel, actually. It's interesting because Arthur C. Clarke was writing the novel for 2001 as the movie was in production. So each informed the other. They were kind of like, he's working on this novel while it was, it's fascinating stuff. Yeah. I want to see your prequel.
Yeah. You have a deep brother in Pip Chodorov, whose dad has this immense history in teaching us culture in America. And he had his own 16 millimeter scope print in his living room watching it as a kid. So I'm going to introduce you to Pip. You know him indirectly, or maybe directly. But here's the question. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Well, I'll say this. I would say it's a curse. Especially when it comes to, for me, it's been a curse when it comes to, say, failed relationships and failures in my own life. And I do tend to have a memory that softens the edges, where my memory of a thing is like, oh, that was a great time, and it doesn't match up necessarily with others who were present. So I tend to be nostalgic about the past and my memory of things, and I tend to maybe make it seem better than it was, but I also think that maybe that's something that's pre-installed in human firmware to, to dull negative experiences. Does that make sense?
That was really good, and it was brief. We got to fly through these because you're a deep thinker, and your process of communicating is the exact same way that I like. This is what James Joyce and Virginia Woolf invented, basically, was stream of consciousness. And it's Tangent City, and I love that. But in order to fit this in our 90, which we could do a series of these for weeks, I would love it. But I know you're a busy guy. So the next
we don't need to do a series, but like I'm here to answer all the questions. So if it's more than 90 minutes, I'm just saying I might need to go to the bathroom. So
that's
watching this, there might be a break.
And that's where I'll expound on Chris Gore for a few minutes, whatever it takes. So the next question, Chris, is tell me someone briefly within your immediate family who had an impact on you, and what specific was that impact? You could call it a role model, but the question's two-part. Within your immediate family and outside your immediate family, one person who you can explain what they,
That's hard. I'm sorry, I'm going to break the rules. I'm going to say two, but
okay,
very brief answers. My mother, who really, even though she didn't have a career as an artist, I believe my mother has the heart of an artist, and she encouraged me. She would say, don't go to the mall to see those mall movies. I would get into, like John Hughes films or whatever, the sort of mainstream crap. She says, you got to go to the art house. You got to go to the Detroit Institute of Arts, where they had a film screening series, and you have to see those types of films. Go to the art house. Don't go to the traditional movie theater. She was always encouraging me to broaden my mind. And I remember many Sundays we would just sit. We had two love seats, sit on the opposite side, and we'd just be reading books. And that was a Sunday. Read the newspaper in the morning and read books. The other one is my father, who was a famous barbershop quartet lead singer. He was in a group called the Vagabonds. And I would go with him when he would sing to, I'm talking about like arenas. He would sing to arenas with people. Like, this is, if you know anything about barbershop music. So he would sing. In fact, he was on the Phil Donahue show when they had a couple of quartets on. And I remember taking off school to be able to stay home, and the excuse was my dad's on TV, which was but the impression my dad always gave was that he treated everyone so well. He was so grateful for his fans. After shows, they would lay out a table and he'd have cassettes and 8-tracks and albums, and he would sign autographs. And he was so kind and gracious to every single person, didn't matter who they are or whatever. Like, he just was, he had this like affinity for his audience and really just treated them well. And when I saw how he treated people, I look and I'm like, oh wow, he was teaching me just by his own actions. So my mother for art, and my dad for just being gracious towards an audience that appreciates what you do.
Really well put. You really get it. You're super articulate. I appreciate it. So now, outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact on you, and what was that impact?
Oh God. Well, didn't I just answer that kind of in a way?
Well, outside your immediate family.
Oh, outside my immediate family. Oh, wow. Yeah. Wow. That's another tough one. Damn you, Gerry.
No, it doesn't have to be early, but it could. I sort of guide it towards being early.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know. There was a guy, I remember, this is going to sound very strange, but in my neighborhood when I was growing up, single-digit aged kid, I remember there was a mass exodus of the fathers. This is a time when divorce was not as common as it is today. And within my neighborhood and friend circle, it spread like a disease. It was like this parent's getting divorced, and this parent, and this parent, this mass exodus of the fathers. And I remember meeting through a neighbor's friend, this guy named Noah, who was in the military. He had served in Vietnam, and he kind of became like this weird adoptive father of all the kids in the neighborhood, and paid attention to us. And I remember he just really taught us about writing this, and he was just an appreciation for writing. I think that guy Noah left an impression on me till today. And I think also just having reading as a normal habit.
Yeah.
That just instilling that obviously made an impression.
That was well done. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
They were Catholic at the beginning, and I do remember going to catechism and then complaining. And I did the same thing when they tried to get me to do Cub Scouts. Cub Scouts conflicted with Godzilla week at the movie. There was the 4:30 movie. The 4:30 movie in Detroit was where they would show a movie, and Godzilla week was happening. I'm like, I have to quit Cub Scouts. It's conflicting with.
That is great. Now, did you?
And the same thing with catechism. Is just like, well, Lost in Space is on every day. I don't want to go to catechism. I mean, eventually, after my parents' divorce, they drifted away from religion. But I see, I'm not negative on religion. I actually think that religion is good in the sense that for a lot of people, it provides community. It provides good values. And I think we've lost that. And I see a very dangerous streak now where almost people's political convictions have come with the same sort of dangerous religious zealotry. And I think that's what I've begun to see. It's just like your political affiliation now makes you a heretic if you're not, makes you evil, right? And I don't believe that. I believe in the inherent goodness of people.
Well, you definitely have ESP because you're anticipating each upcoming question. What age were you when your parents divorced? When they divorced?
I was 9 years old when they were separated, and I remember being pulled out of class and brought to the principal's office and being told your parents are getting divorced, and then having to go home to deal with that. My father had left, and the biggest memory I have is that he took the television. So
he took the
television to his apartment or whatever he was doing. Yeah.
So back to religion for a second. Do you pray?
I do not, but I do meditate. And by meditate, meaning I repeat things to myself in my head, and generally on the level of just being grateful, like I'm grateful for where I am. I remember going to my 5-year high school reunion and observing that 3 people had died.
Yeah.
Between the time we had graduated and here I'm in my early 20s, and wait, 3 people already dead. One young girl named Teresa, she died of cancer. Another guy died in the military. And it just shocked me. I'm like, we're all young. What do you mean? So to make it to where I am age-wise, I was born in 1965. And just to sort of have I have a very optimistic, positive outlook on things, even in light of horrible things happening.
No, that's good, Chris. That's good. Now the next question is, what is it? Oh, if God exists, what do you want God to tell you after you die?
Wow. What's the point? What was the point of that? What was the point of that?
Oh,
what was the point of that? What was the point? What are you doing? We're on this, because look, I just having read a lot of science fiction, obviously the existence of aliens is very fascinating to me. I just don't know that, because we're such a blip, because we've reached where we are in modern civilization, I don't know that we'll end up meeting real aliens, because for them to have existed on the same timeline not that they haven't existed in the past or will in the future, but it's like to have alien civilization exist in the same timeline where we can actually communicate, I think is so, the chances of that are so rare. The chances of there being aliens, yeah. But in terms of God, like, what was the point of this? Like, what is this? What is the universe? I just want to know, I want to know all the big answers.
That is great answer.
But here's the thing. I believe that religion is something that we made up.
Yeah.
We made up religion as a way to explain something, to give us bigger purpose and meaning, and to sort of throw down some rules that some of them don't make sense, but in ancient civilization did make a lot of sense for health reasons and whatnot, and just for the sustainability of society, of civilization, like don't murder each other, things like that. But I just think it's kind of arrogant of man to think that we can explain this, and there's this book and it's 2,000 years old and we can explain it and here are the reasons, and there have been religions previous to that,
but that's Chris, you'll relate to this. That's Sidney Lumet saying, can movies really do anything? And like my friend says, yeah, they can get kids to roll their cigarettes up in their t-shirt like James Dean did in his sleeve. But right. Sidney Lumet was definitely a socially conscious filmmaker. He says films can't do diddly squat, but it ain't going to keep me from trying.
Well, I would disagree with them. I do think it has the possibility to change hearts and minds. I do think it can humanize something. And I've always believed, which is why while I believe in inclusion and diversity in all things, which is something, it's IDIC, that thing, infinite diversity, infinite combination, which is from Star Trek, Spock. Yeah. I believe that the purpose of all fiction is to identify with someone who is not you. So which is why maybe I feel fortunate. My mother kind of pushed me to see movies with subtitles, but I love them. Yeah. And I grew up watching a lot of Asian cinema, Toho. It started with Toho films and then other branched out from there. But I believe that we have an opportunity to be someone we are not and to live through their experiences. And that is tremendous. And that is the purpose of fiction. And I believe that it can have an impact.
You know what you're doing is an amazing thing. I've done this for 30 years. You're anticipating the next question, and then in your answer, you're anticipating the question after that. So I'm going back 2 notches now, but I loved it. But now I'm not going to have you answer this, but it feels like you have ESP. I ask people, do you have ESP? Because you're sensing it. So the next question is, do evil people exist? Or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Wow. I would say, having spent time in Hollywood, yes, evil people exist. And I believe we're at a time now where maybe people are starting to wake up and understand that the politicians are not the answers to all of our problems. Whatever your party affiliation, no politician is going to save you. Yeah. I think we're living through a time that has brought to light many issues. And some of those are that the politicians don't have all the answers. So perhaps maybe we should not put our faith in them, that there are saviors. And that, listener, viewer, whatever, is what the book Dune is about. If I could encourage you to read any book, it would be Dune, published in 1965, written by Frank Herbert, who, if you read interviews with him, his intention in writing that, because he was not a fan of JFK. John F. Kennedy, he thought was an incredibly good-looking and charismatic political figure, obviously president of the United States, tragically assassinated, but he also got us involved in Vietnam. He got us involved in these wars, and he was very charismatic. He was selling you this. And Frank Herbert actually preferred Nixon as a president because he said that all the evil was right there on the surface. So he actually preferred Nixon as president because he was what he was out in the open, whereas JFK is like this charismatic guy who can lead us into war. And the character Paul Atreides in the novel Dune is actually based on JFK. And the novel digs deep into this kid, he's 15 years old when the novel starts, and Paul Atreides is burdened with this truth that comes to light via this spice melange, which is a drug where it allows him to see things like the future. He sees himself effectively becoming what would amount to a space Hitler, responsible for the deaths of billions of people in a religious jihad, right? And how does he undo his legacy, his false legacy of being a prophet and being a messiah? How does he undo this before it causes damage to the galaxy? If you were a young Hitler, how would you derail your destiny? And that is what it's about. It's a very complex novel. I pick up something new every time I read it. Like I said, I read it 5 or 6 times. Through high school, I read it every year, every summer. And then I read all the different novels up to like God Emperor of Dune. And then I went beyond that, Heretics. It's so amazing. And if you're a fan of Game of Thrones, I believe that effectively Dune is Game of Thrones. It's sex, it's religion, it's politics, it's everything. In any case, this is a very long-winded answer, and my apologies. No, but I'm very much looking forward to the Denis Villeneuve Dune movie, and the book, really start with the book. In fact, the Audible version of the book, which I read several months ago, in a thought in preparation to see the movie. Obviously, who knows when this Dune movie is going to come out now, 2021, whatever. They do a sort of dramatized where they hire actors to play different voices. It's fantastic.
Good.
So, no, Gerry, I'm long-winded. I'm
right, Chris. Don't apologize. You're a beautiful human being because you're articulate, and it's good because you really summarized Dune well, and it helped me, and I'm going to dig a lot deeper in it. I love the doc by Jodorowsky's doc, but it evoked the favorite joke of Marshall McLuhan and Alfred Hitchcock. Two goats are eating film, 35 millimeter film coming out of a film can right over here in Culver City in the back lot. One goat turns to the other and goes, "The book was better." Pretty good. Yeah. So the next question is, you can take a breath. I'm going to read a couple modern thinkers' thoughts, but the question is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. Fellini says, I need an enemy. In Chinese proverb goes, he who cannot agree with their enemy is controlled by them. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you, Chris Gore, advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you specifically respond to the Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, one, I agree with that. I think that's something that I have definitely learned, which is why it bothers me that it's become so popular almost to be a victim, right?
Yeah.
I feel like when you're a victim, you've empowered the person who is presumably victimizing you.
Yeah.
And I've always, unfortunately, at least when I was younger, if anybody bullied me, maybe it's my Irish blood. I was one to fight and push back. I didn't give a shit how big the bully was. And when I was younger, I definitely was like, Premier Magazine, they're the enemy. They're whatever my enemies maybe when it came to I was doing Film Threat and, what I considered to be competition, were they were an enemy to be defeated. And rivals. Nowadays, I actually believe that you kind of disarm your enemy when you make them your friend. I really do believe. Yeah. I believe in that. But I would never forget whatever transgression that occurred. I would never forget it. But I do believe in forgiveness. Unfortunately, I think that you're empowering people by being a victim of that, right? And I don't want to. The last thing I want to be is a victim.
Yeah.
So set phasers to ignore, and especially when it comes to, when it comes to being attacked, I'm sort of one to either completely ignore or just say, go fuck yourself. That's sort of, I'm quick to that because I don't give a shit. In fact, I've said like a who gives a shit attitude is like this protective shield. That it's probably why I've engaged far less recently. I really took stock of the last like decade. I was very active on social media. I think I signed up in 2009 to Facebook and Twitter and all that. And I look at like what I accomplished in that decade and then the decade previous. And when I say accomplished, I mean physical evidence that a thing exists, that I did something, wrote a book, made a film, did a project like a website, or created a podcast. And my output was far more dramatic in the previous decade as opposed to the decade when I was using social media. So I decided like, I'm not going to quit. If I'm a smoker, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to be like one of those guys that like will bum. I have friends that quit smoking that will bum a cigarette when, I just want one. So for me, social media is like that. Like I use it effectively to promote what I do, but I don't take it seriously. And I see an entire country polarized by social media.
Yeah.
I mean, we may have been polarized before based on conflicting values, but social media is the fire that's ignited the gasoline that was already there. So,
McLuhan says a great line. He says, I didn't start the fire. I just turned the alarm on. So indeed, you're using social media right now, Zoom, StreamYard, whatever, to say that. And you said it well. Now,
I also read that Jaron Lanier book.
Right.
You heard of this book?
I know Jaron Lanier's stuff well. Yeah.
Jaron Lanier, amazing futurist. God, I followed his work for years.
Good.
Every interview that he does, I think he's fascinating. Yeah, his book is fantastic, by the way.
Well, I'll brag for 1 second. He spoke here in Culver City at Tim Robbins Theater, and I had the first question, and I said, "Did you ever read Finnegan's Wake out loud with a group of people about this and that immediate? What do you call it? Technological determinism, blah blah blah." And he looked at the audience and he goes, "All us people in San Francisco think you LA people are dumb. You just proved them wrong." Then he went on to answer the question pretty good. And he's a great human because he knows the business he's in midst of. He can say it's services and disservices. Just like the business you're in, you're willing to say the services and disservices, but you carry on in it. So this is perfect lead into this, because this really gets into the roots of you being a projectionist in your own little home neighborhood theater. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin over 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, why do you go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when you can go outside and see a real tree? Then years later, Faulkner said, and this is Hunter Thompson's mantra, best fiction, the best fiction can be more true than journalism, which is exactly what you said earlier about fiction. Now, here's the question, Chris. Why do we as humans have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Wow, that's first of all, that's a great question, which leads me to, first of all, I think it's working out issues, right? You're trying to reframe whatever fiction is to work out something that may have happened in your life that was tragic to get the result you wanted. We've all had the experience of you get in this like verbal exchange with someone, and then you think about the perfect retort after you walk away from the conversation, like, if only I did that. Why didn't I say that? And I feel like that's what a lot of fiction is, right? It's like, here's what I should have said. And especially when I see a lot of first-time films by independent filmmakers, a lot of their first movies are working out whatever their trauma is. That's why so many independent films have a lot of cliches, which is something tragic happened. It's a road trip home. to work out. There's a death in the family. There's a family tragedy. Something's got to happen. So many I see recurring themes and tropes in indie movies, and I think it's because a lot of first-time filmmakers are trying to work out their first movie is like trying to basically work something out psychologically within themselves. It's truly artistic expression, but it really is a form of therapy. So that's really why I believe that exists, that fiction on stage is or in film or in literature. I kind of put them all together, right? They're all like a form of expression. Just writing is probably the least expensive. You know, all you need is paper and a pencil. But yeah, it's just working stuff out.
That was really good. And I have to tell you this one. I met a doctor. I says, "Where'd you study?" He said, "The oldest university in the world. It's in Italy." I said, and he turned to me and he goes, "Have you ever seen La Dolce Vita?" And I goes, "Yeah." He says, "I lived La Dolce Vita." And here was my retort that a day later, I thought this is what I should have said to him. And I've never said this film. I've never seen this film, but I wanted to say, have you ever seen Dumb or Dumber? I've lived Dumb or Dumber, just as a retort. But that was good because David Lynch, to me, his best film is Eraserhead. And most people go, "Yeah, that's all right." And it's all.
No, it absolutely is. It is.
We're vets at this, and it's Woody Allen nailing it when the woman comes up to him and says, "I like your early funny films." You can go through.
That's so funny.
You can go through the history of art, and it's usually what you just defined. When you're starving at 27, I have a whole lecture on at the age of 27, where every art form, the geniuses make their perfect piece. That's their first piece at 27. So yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was going to say on David Lynch, I am a huge fan of Eraserhead. I think that movie, when I saw it at midnight, it was a midnight movie. It kind of one of those early movies that kind of defined that market, midnight movies, films like El Topo by Alejandro Jodorowsky and whatnot. But that movie and David Lynch's work in general, he's the filmmaker that best captures the experience of having a dream. Yeah. Nothing makes sense. Nothing is logical. The sound design is even very womb-like, right? It's this sort of weird womb-like noise. Who is his sound designer? Is it Alan Splett?
Yeah. We don't have to do a commercial for Lynch. We know that's good and that's perfect.
But I'm just saying. I agree with you that Eraserhead is his best film.
I would argue with you because he's a Buñuel wannabe, and Buñuel is the dream guy of all time. But we're not here to argue. We're here to talk about who you are. The next question is, and you're really deep, and I appreciate this. What first attracted you to go, I can show films? This is two things. Well, it's really three, but let's just say I can be a writer. What did you read and go, well, I can do this? Because you just said at the beginning that if someone says, what do you do, Chris? You say, I'm a writer. So that's sort of all encompassing because you showed films as a kid. You started this idea of what a projectionist is. People don't realize a projectionist is part of the experience. Yeah. And the film screen is part of the experience. And then you started writing and you become a filmmaker and an author. But what first attracted you? And you read a lot, your mother leading you to reading. What said, I can write? What was the kickover point? Something you read, or where did you go, I can write?
Well, it might surprise you. I think that bad writing is the thing that convinced me I could write because, if it wasn't like something like, when I read Dune, I thought, well, I'm never going to be able to do something as complex as this. And when you look at Frank Herbert's background, he began as a journalist and, he wrote Dune late in life, did years of research, and his particular area of journalism was he studied the environment. He studied actually like desert life and whatnot. But the thing that convinced me really was just bad movies and bad writing. And especially when I looked at like punk rock fanzines that existed in the time, I'm like, first of all, this writing is shit. It's terrible. So it was actually the people that inspired me to step up and actually do my own thing were people who were terrible at what they did, because I thought, well, if here they are published, then I can do that.
Right.
And so that got me at least to pursue it and think a little bit more deeply.
Right. That's really good. So what you did is, the next question's twofold. So when you're creating, whether it's the magazine for 35 years, whether it's your feature film, whether it's your book, when you're creating, how much does intention play in your creative process? Let me set it up with this. A screenwriting teacher at the University of Michigan told me, great art or great films, great screenplays are when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. And so there's two parts to this question. You can answer it as you will. And that's like, what role does intention play in your creative process for, your whole 35 years of creating? And then how much are you thinking of your audience while you're creating? Because Duchamp said, there's no art without an audience. So while you're making something, how much is the audience there in your head?
Well, the audience is definitely there, but I would probably say, this might mark me as a narcissist to say that I'm my own audience. I like to create things that I'd like to see. I mean, part of the reason for even creating Film Threat out of high school was there were no magazines or fanzines or anything that talked about the movies that I liked. So it's like, well, I guess I should just make it then. And when I look at the projects that I've created, it's like, this doesn't exist. I would like to have this. I think I'll do it. I wrote a book on film festivals, the Ultimate Film Festival Survival Guide. And it frustrated me that a lot of the books that I read about film, for filmmakers were very academic, or basically filled with a lot of bullshit like, go for your dream. Go for your dream. And I kind of feel like first of all, it's a great message to be inspiring. And I think you need about 5% inspiration. The other 95% is you need hard information on how to do it. Here's how to write a press kit. Here's why are you at a film festival? To get reviews and to get reaction from an audience. Right. Here's how to do this. Here's, I feel like I at least my intention with doing, I don't consider the Ultimate Film Festival Survival Guide, that book, like, that's not a piece of art. That's really like something to help a filmmaker who I would like to see grow and begin some kind of career. This just give them the tools, right? And so I'm really looking at like, here's the tools. I've been very upfront, and whenever I do like panels at film festivals, I've given out phone numbers and email addresses and even my own phone number, and just said, I just like to be no bullshit about that. The problem is I don't know that my way of looking at things is the thing that people necessarily want these days. It might be the thing they need. I'm like I'm like the mean dad that might tell you what you need to hear, but you don't like hearing it. You know what I mean? Like, and just being a parent, I've often said to my other, and I observe this, especially in Los Angeles, where I've observed the worst fucking parenting ever, which is an adult person turning to their 3-year-old and asking them, but what do you want? And I think to myself, why the fuck would you do that? I'm not going to ask a 3-year-old what a 3-year-old wants. Here's what you're being served for food. Eat that shit. If not, be hungry. I'm not leaving my destiny to a child. And I see that type of horrible parenting and I thought I would never be that kind of parent. I'm not my kid's friend. I'm my kids. Oh, actually my kids do like me, but I don't know, liking is different than being friend, but my purpose as a parent is to give my kids information so that they don't die. Yeah. So that they can survive, so that they have all the information they need, so that they have life lessons, and then it's up to them. I'm a teach a man to fish kind of guy. That's what I try to do with everything that I do. So I do think do come at, when it comes to a project, I do have purpose and intention. And a lot of it is to say, fuck you to Hollywood. It's to say, here's a different pathway. Because Hollywood, as we've all seen, has all these.
Yeah.
I mean, look, nepotism is never going away. All the bad stuff about Hollywood, as much as they like to show you that they're good, it's bullshit. We all know there's hypocrisy. I think there's a different pathway, and that's independent film or being an independent creator. And so my goal, my purpose in doing everything with Film Threat, whatever, is here's other ways of doing it. Go this way.
Yeah.
Take on this path.
Really well put, because it reminds me of, to me, the Coen brothers are Preston Sturges wannabes. And if I told them that, they'd go, thanks for the compliment. And, you know, Preston knew how to jab at Hollywood so they would laugh, and it was deep jabs, because he basically is an alchemist. He takes two known things, put them together, in the new third unknown thing that he creates, screwball comedy, he satirizes that. He just doesn't go, I've been, but now here's a good question. I will admit, I just came up with this as one of on my script is, I would imagine Frank Herbert is your favorite writer of all time, or one of them. If he
up in the top, I mean,
right, in the top.
Palahniuk, Chuck Palahniuk, I happen to love Chuck Palahniuk.
Chuck too. Okay, so say one of these writers was going to say, Chris Gore's 35 years of Film Threat is a cross between who and who. If you wanted the ultimate compliment, like them saying this to tell the world what Chris has accomplished, what would you like them to say? Chris is a cross between what and what, or who and who?
Oh my God.
Just off the top of your head. Don't think too hard.
The Sex Pistols meets Benjamin Franklin.
Oh God, that is perfect.
Just because, I mean, Benjamin Franklin, when you look at his career, he had a very diverse career. When I look at my career, that's why I'm always confused when people say, what do you do? Well, writer, but technically I'm the publisher of Film Threat, but I am the author of books, and I've done so. Like, I don't even know what to tell people. Like, I get interested in a project and I see, like, well, if I do this thing here, this could be the result. It could have an impact on people in some sort of positive way. So
but you didn't say hyphenate. You said writer. Right off the bat, you nailed it.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Chris, whether I'm speaking or whatever, my brain thinks like a writer.
Yeah, no, your orality is amazing too, because you can flow with your thoughts, and it really communicates a lot to me. So McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. Mm-hmm. So clothing extends our skin, knife and fork extends our teeth, the shutter in the projector extends our eyelid. So religion is an invention. It extends something, some humanness. So it doesn't have to be a tangible thing. What does the magazine? So you grew up like me. I'm a magazine junkie. What does the magazine, the typical American magazine, whether it be Mad Magazine or Film Threat, what humanness does it extend?
This is going to sound like a strange response to this, but it's random access.
Random access.
And by that, I mean, what we're exposed to when it comes to big tech, whether it be social media or Google or whatnot, is something that's filtered and curated for us.
Yeah.
What I love about a magazine is I can flip through it. I can physically flip through it, and randomly a word will pop out or an image.
That is amazing, because you know what McLuhan said? What does the movie extend? He said, everybody can say the eye or the brain or consciousness. He said the foot, because you're traveling.
Right.
You know, and look at another Michigander. You know, I was raised in Michigan too. Ken Burns said he went to the Ann Arbor Film Festival and he saw his first naked breasts there.
Wow.
What a life.
Well, what I love about the Ann Arbor Film Festival is that it champions experimental film, which I think is where, that's where there's real innovation. Hollywood just co-ops all this bullshit and is very good at marketing. I mean, this is why the marketing budgets are bigger than the budgets to actually make the thing. Right. Which that tells you where the priority is when it comes to experimental film, which is where David Lynch came from as well, to reference earlier, is really like there are no rules. And I enjoy not having rules. I don't do well with rules. That's why it's like I've sort of had one foot in. I mean, when I look back at my career, is mostly projects that were self-generated, although I have been hired by companies to do things. But I'll just say this, I don't last very long. The corporate culture is not, and I do believe that we're getting to a place now where as our society becomes more corporate authoritarian, like it's gonna get a little scary where the independent voices are going to come from, because I feel like a lot of the opinions that are parroted around are just hive mind bullshit. So there's not a lot of critical thinking that I observe, and especially on social media, which I think is the worst place to discuss ideas. It's just terrible. What we're doing with this discourse and podcasts and whatnot, this is a place where we can discuss and at least explore ideas and whatnot that I think you can come to at least some understanding. You don't have to like it, but it doesn't need to affect you. That's why one of the early things early on in Film Threat, I mean, today they call it woke, but which I don't entirely agree the way woke is being used, because it's being used to suppress voices, do things that may or may not be good in the long run. But what we used to call it when I was in college was just become aware. If you're aware that you're surrounded by all these things, you can avoid being affected by it. And that's kind of where I've always lived, is like I sit burdened with this awareness that this is bullshit. Politicians can't be trusted. It's you just see it. And so if you can see it, it's sort of like that movie They Live, starring Roddy Piper, directed by John Carpenter. You put those glasses on and it's like, oh, okay, I see this bullshit, but I'm going to choose to not be affected by it. I'm going to make my choices to kind of avoid being led down a pathway.
You nailed McLuhan's line is understanding is not having a point of view. It's seeing the picture. Now you can have your own opinion, but it's called suspended judgment. It's almost like Zen. And so Peter Greenaway has this great line: cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. It's a moving image medium. All we've done for 100 years is film plays. That's why D.W. Griffith carried around a copy of Charles Dickens in his back pocket. So then you get an experimental filmmaker like Tony Conrad's The Flicker, and it's just black and white, flickering back on and off. And it's strobic, and it will put you in an epileptic fit if you are so inclined. So just briefly, are experimental films telling stories a different way or doing something completely different?
I think that they're trying to evoke a reaction in your brain. You know what I mean? Like it's, just and I don't consider myself to be an experimental film expert, but I've seen enough of them to go like, I know what you're trying to provoke in me. So usually I'm probably a terrible person to ask, because I'm going to deconstruct it and go, I know what you're doing. It's sort of like whenever I go to the doctor's office, I'm always very inquisitive. Like my body is this huge science experiment. I get very, like, I have no qualms. I'm like, whatever, cool, poke me, prod me. I'm always fascinated by it. And this is like back last summer in June 2020, I had my appendix out, emergency appendectomy. And I found the whole process to be fascinating. It was like the weirdest thing, like, oh, you're going to put me under. I met my surgeon. She was amazing. In fact, she lives in my neighborhood in Pasadena. I was able to walk to her office to drop off a check for basically saving my life. I thought that was kind of cool. But she explained the whole process to me. And I found it like, I don't know, maybe in another life, if I'd had the discipline, I could have been a doctor or an attorney. And just I find the whole thing like, I sort of dissociate myself from it and then just sort of look at like, ooh, what are you doing? Like, what's this for? Like, oh, sure, poke here. I have a high tolerance for pain. So all that stuff being done to me is, in fact, I'm one of the people the pain is really intense when you have when you're having appendicitis, and they gave me morphine and I felt warm for a few minutes and then it didn't work. I'm one of the very small percentage of people that morphine does not work on. So
that was good. And so I talked to a famous movie director 35 years ago. I says, why he made rock video too. And I says, why do rock video makers feel so obliged to edit fast? He said, because we've learned to take in information faster. Marty was saying, I edit my films faster because of MTV. So can we I ask this with a bias. Can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
No, I think we have learned to take in information faster, and for this reason. And I think that I realized, I mean, I was diagnosed like ADHD years ago, and I used to take some medication for it. I do not any longer. I don't like to feel medicated. I also have seasonal allergies, and I don't like to be medicated. So I use a neti pot. Look that up, NETI pot. Way better than anything that you would be prescribed. I'm not really, I don't want to be one of those people that the big pharma has to extort, where I'm hooked on a drug that I have to take. I'd rather change my diet, or rather just create a different habit. And I realized that. But one of the things, I read a book, it's called Driven from Distraction. And I'm getting to your point, that explains, and what I realized as I'm reading this book is I had already come up with the coping skills to deal with my ADHD that were described in the book. I'm like, oh, I'm already doing all this stuff. Just by trial and error, I realized in order to actually be productive, which to me is finishing something, completing something, that's completing something and evidence you did that thing and it's out in the world. So in order to be able to do that, I had to come up with coping skills, and those coping skills I passed on to a lot of other people. What I realized early on is that I could read and listen to something at the same time.
Yeah.
And this is something that I think now with our devices, right, with these little black mirrors that we carry around, right? Like people often, and they'll talk about it, they're binging a show, but they got their phone in their hand. So it's almost like, you can watch an episode of Star Trek, the original Star Trek series, and probably The Next Generation as well. And they've often talked about it being a radio play, that if you didn't watch it, you would discern you would be able to get everything out of the story just by listening to an episode of Star Trek, right?
Wow.
I feel like we've become that now. I feel like, with binging so much, and I really despise this term, content.
Love it.
Fuck the term content. I think that might be a new t-shirt that we'll do for Film Thread. I'm very proud of this. Maybe here's a t-shirt that we made that sort of encapsulates my opinion of 2020. It says, "By 2020, you bloody bastard." That image is from it's Charlton Heston's hand from the movie Beneath the Planet of the Apes when he blows up the world.
Right.
Nuclear, that's his hand at the end of the Beneath the Planet of the Apes. So that's available in Threat Shop.
We could talk about content forever because
but what I realized, like, I can listen and read at the same time. Now, not something that, like, if something's grabbing my attention, put the device down or whatever, but I used to read magazines and have the TV on. And I paid attention to news. I was very interested. I don't know why, but like the things that, like, early on, I've seen every presidential debate since Carter Reagan. So I watched all the presidential debates and the vice presidential debates. I remember when Geraldine Ferraro ran as well. in the VP slot. So I watch all those, and I watch the Super Bowls, even though you wouldn't consider that I would be a sports person. I love sports. Yeah. I think Woody Allen said something like this, that sports are like watching a really great documentary unfold live. You hear the stakes, it's career, it's this person used to work with this person, so there's behind the scenes drama. And so, but yeah, like I think we have evolved. These things have evolved the way we do things. Like it's almost like, and it's very distressing if you see this documentary, The Social Dilemma, which I was fortunate enough to interview the director, Jeff Orlowski, on another episode of the Film Threat podcast. But it's almost like this is part of our place setting now, right? This knife, fork, spoon, device.
Yeah, well,
this is kind of terrible.
Yeah, this, Chris, is what you're saying is what McLuhan learned from T.S. Eliot when he said content is like when the criminal's robbing your house, he whips out a juicy steak, and the watchdog you give him the steak and he runs away and he can commit his crime. And content is the juicy steak for the watchdog of our mind. Mm-hmm. So it's a beautiful analogy. What's more important, conviction or compromise? I know it depends and it's both, but just in general, how would you nail that?
I would say conviction.
Yeah.
But it depends on the situation. Like, I believe that we move forward it sort of depends on when it comes to politics. I think compromise is critical. I remember when Republicans and Democrats used to get along. Now it's a religion. Crazy enough.
Now,
but like when it comes to art, I believe conviction is important. So, when it comes to community, compromise. When it comes to art and personal, it's conviction. So I'm going to get the best of both worlds. See, I tricked you.
You're putting it in context. My questions are just jokes and they're out to be tricks. So you did well. This is the question that follows. It is, with all the accomplishments in your life, how do you rate these three elements: luck, skill, and ambition? What played the most important role, second and third?
Wow. I would say I was always very ambitious. I had newspaper routes from the time I was 9 years old to the time I was 19. And I had not just a newspaper route, I had 4 of them. So I was extremely ambitious. If I wanted something, I didn't realize growing up that my family was poor. I didn't realize it because I feel like when you're loved, it doesn't matter, right? Like, if you are loved, it doesn't matter. I only realized that my family didn't have a lot of money when I got to high school, and all these kids were in the ski club, and they're like, "Do you want to be in the ski club?" And it cost X amount. And I was like, I can't afford to be in the ski club. But because I had newspaper routes, I always had money. I was lending my mom money. That's like, and I had 4 newspaper routes, which included a hospital that I used to deliver newspapers to back then, which had some very life-changing experiences delivering newspapers to that hospital, because I met a kid who was my age, who was burned on 90% of his body through an explosion from a gas tank. And he didn't give a shit about the newspaper I was selling. It was sort of the third rate. It was the Daily Tribune. It wasn't the top newspaper. It wasn't the Free Press or the Detroit News. It was the Daily Tribune. So it was more of the local news in Royal Oak. And this kid had no real interest in the paper. He just wanted someone to talk to him. So he was giving me my 20 cents so that he and I would sit and have a conversation. Yeah. And I remember just feeling whatever depression and I feel like when the teenage years is just filled with depression about life and where you're in place in the universe and the future. And I was probably 13, 14 at the time. And I remember seeing him, and I had never a right to ever be depressed ever in my life, in my teen years. When I looked at him and what his future held, what my future held, I had no right. And just seeing him every day, fully bandaged up, seeing the scars, and the fact that he bought a newspaper, I'd see the newspaper stacked. He didn't read them. He didn't care. Yeah. So I do think that I was very ambitious, because in order to get something, achieve something, I needed to be ambitious. If I wanted that Godzilla Aurora model kit, I needed to have a newspaper route. If I wanted to get a VCR, I needed money.
What's after that? Skill or luck?
I would say I definitely, God, luck. I would say I was lucky. I mean, I had, my family was, I feel like my grandparents were kind of surrogate parents. Once my parents got divorced and my mother became a single working mother, she was not at the house as much. And my grandparents kind of took that role. And I feel that sort of put me in a position of just being lucky. The one thing is that they taught me, they never gave me anything. Everything I did had to be earned. So everything I did, like I had to mow the lawn, I had to pick, apples. I had to go pick fruit. They would take us these things, they weigh the baskets, then you go out and then they say, here's what your baskets weigh, and then you go and pick fruit. We would go. So they taught me that never ever gave me a thing. It was always you need to earn this. That taught me a lot, but that sort of put me in a position where I kind of felt like luck kind of came my way.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it was just being open and having a positive attitude. Skill and knowledge, that came later. I really feel like every level I attained, I didn't have the skill or knowledge to be at that level. I had to learn it while I was in it. And whether that was professionally or even in like relationships with my marriage that became a failed marriage, although I don't consider it a failure because we were together over a decade and produced 2 children, as I said, who are not assholes.
Yeah.
I would argue they're not assholes and they're good kids.
Well, Chris, you nailed your story about the newspaper delivery was David O'Reilly made like one of the biggest video games ever called Mountain, and he lectured in Ann Arbor and he said, fuck narrative, it's all about empathy. And you're delivering the newspaper story was pure empathy.
But the purpose, this is what I'll say, I'll go back to a point I made earlier. The purpose of all fiction is to instill empathy. And if you haven't done that, that's why I get very, it's strange. It's like, in order to empathize with someone who isn't you, they need to in some way identify emotionally. I think we get way too caught up in labels and sort of all these intersectional labels of I'm this, and this, and this. It's like, but we're human.
Yeah.
Let me identify with your humanness first. And then all this other stuff, none of that shit matters.
Yeah.
Because at least in my experiences in doing Film Threat, I've sought to bring in very diverse voices and especially people I disagree with, oddly enough, because I feel like I don't learn anything. I don't learn anything unless I have someone on my team who I disagree with, because I want that point of view represented. So that has been my attempt. I'm not saying I've succeeded. I just know that, like, look, our writers at Film Threat are just it's a very weird group, and I love it. It's sort of like, it reminds me of at least when we used to have physical gatherings. Okay.
Yeah, no, that was
tangent and rambling.
No, you're doing great. And you're, if you promise me the 90, we got 10 more minutes. So can you do 10 more?
Of course, dude. I'll go as long. My meeting just canceled after. So.
Okay, good. So Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're usually taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness that you've turned into a strength.
Oh, wow. I believe this completely. And I do think that, I guess when I think back when I was a kid, I was physically a late bloomer. I don't think I got pubic hair until I was like 16. Right. So I was like and then I would see guys that were like 14 that had like full beards and already were getting the widow's peak. Right. So physically, when I was a kid, I was a late bloomer, and I looked until like I was 30. I looked like I was about 15 years old. I looked like a kid. And I feel like the thing that saved me, because I was physically underdeveloped at a young age, was my sense of humor. I really developed a sense of humor, which became disarming. So I kind of took my physical weakness and it helped me develop a sense of humor where I would be friends with people that you wouldn't think I would be friends with. And I remember I went to Royal Oak Kimball High School, which no longer exists in Royal Oak. They merged the two high schools together, Kimball High School and Dondero. So, but I remember endearing the jocks that would normally, in many cases, end up being bullies, and they thought I was kind of fun. I wasn't the last picked, even though I deserved to be based on my physical and athletic abilities. I should have by any means been the last pick, but people thought I was funny, and I had a sense of humor about myself, and I've learned. I mean, early on, and I could make the classroom laugh. I do remember being sent to the office several times in high school for making jokes at the expense of the teacher. And I think that kind of attitude has gotten me into trouble in other ways as well. Just having a sense of humor when I probably shouldn't have.
Wow, you really nailed that. Okay, so Chris, the biopic of Chris Gore is going to be made. Who's going to star as you and who's going to direct? Just briefly, off the top of your head.
Oh, wow. Probably James Gunn and Chris Pratt, or at least anyone named Chris Hemsworth, Chris Pine. I don't know. That's too, I don't know. James Gunn, I would say, because James Gunn has a great sense of humor, but also goes for deeper layers when you're not expecting it. And yeah.
No, that was a stupid question, and that's what I specialize in. So here's the next one.
No, it's not a stupid question. It's fun.
Is perception reality?
Absolutely. And this is actually why I think we're getting into trouble, is people's perceptions of things, because we live in social media bubbles, informs their reality, which isn't reality. Which is why, previous to the most recent election, I talked to friends of mine on the left, and they're like, oh, Biden, it's going to be a blue wave. And then I talked to my friends on the right, and they're like, Trump's going to win. Trump's going to win. And neither was accurate. It wasn't a wave of anything. It really just was an expression of how divided we were. And I think it's also because, or divided we are, it's an expression of like people living in those bubbles and a lack of empathy, and how this country's really become. I look at where we are right now. This is going to sound very strange, but where we are right now is there are forces out there trying to divide us, right? Trying to divide us by political class, political affiliation, trying to divide us when it comes to race. And I look on this as we should have learned the lessons from Alex Raymond and the comic strip, which became a serial, which became a movie called Flash Gordon. And Flash Gordon's idea was that there's this totalitarian, authoritarian dictator named Ming the Merciless, and he keeps these kingdoms of Mongo fighting amongst each other. And why is he doing this? It's so you don't see who the real enemy is. Because I believe that where we're headed toward a class war. The class disparity has become more divided in my lifetime. My kids will not be able to have as good a quality of life as I have enjoyed. The jobs are not there. What it pays isn't there. And it's so I really see everything is through the lens of movies, Gerry.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So Flash Gordon, if you look at it, and it's really obvious, there's these people, then they hate these people, and they're the people with the wings, and these people are this kind of people, and it's the lizard men versus the hawk men versus the enemy is Ming. And it takes an earthling, Flash Gordon, to say, hey, why don't we just all team up and fight them? And this is why I kind of feel like when I see people of all, like, I really feel like that what's coming, I believe, and I saw someone tweet this, I can't take credit for it, I don't know, but someone said that 2020 was the trailer for 2021. Because what's coming is civil unrest unlike we've ever seen, because of workers' needs are not being taken care of in light of all of what's been happening. And I don't believe necessarily that, especially if you look at the history of our government, that everything that they're doing has some altruistic intent.
Yeah. Well,
again, read the book Dune. Read the book Dune.
No, I'm going to investigate more. And what you're doing is you're showing how you're a comprehensive awareness person. You're comprehensively aware, and you used another two words that I love: coping mechanisms. That what we learned from studying James Joyce, Finnegan's Wake, and McLuhan is that humans invent things, they extend our humanness, and then they have hidden psychic effects. So, you know, studying the movies as much as you have, you know what it does on the surface to humans.
Mhm.
As Billy Wilder said so astutely, all I care is if they like my movie as much as the popcorn. So you know the surface level of movies, and then you know the hidden psychic effects of movies. So if we study the hidden psychic effects, then we can reveal coping mechanisms on how to deal with what we don't like. The history of movies is warfare. So here's another question for you, Chris. You've really been articulate, and I appreciate it. I've learned a lot. And since you've done this for 35 years, let's just say being a writer in all your projects, tell me one major element that stayed the same and one major element that's changed.
Well, I'll tell you what's changed is I believe I've evolved into a much better manager of projects. And I mean this in terms of, when I look early in my career, I believe that the way that I managed and did Film Threat, my sources of inspiration were Michael Corleone and Captain Kirk, and they were very much like my way or the highway. And I don't think that that's a good way to inspire people to do work for you, which is why my early doing projects is sort of littered with a history of people that told me to go fuck myself, and I deserved it. So what I've learned, in perhaps the last decade is that, you're never too old to learn, is that sort of a shared ownership of like giving ownership to people to have their own thing and like giving them freedom. I would always give creative freedom because I like something that I usually generally like something that's not mine. I don't read my own writing. I don't listen to, once it's out in the world, I don't look at a podcast or listen to it or what. After I'm done with something, I'm done with it. And I always would cringe when I would see myself on television because I know what I said. I don't want to watch it.
Yeah.
But I think I've just learned to be better at, which has actually expanded what I'm able to do. I feel like now all the things I wanted to do when I was, younger and wanted to do those things, but didn't have the capabilities. Now I've developed those capabilities just by being more empathetic in the workplace. Right. And attending to my way of managing now is more on the level of mentoring. I'm always looking to teach something, but not tell someone what to do. And I even cringe at when people say like, I'll be introduced maybe with a group of friends and, invariably I become friends with people that I work with. And they say, well, this is my boss. And I say, don't call me boss.
Yeah.
Just say we work together.
Yeah.
I've never been a fan of titles and stuff because I think people get caught up in those a lot. But so that's, I think, what's changed. How I've stayed the same as my convictions, in terms of being a fuck you to Hollywood and be and try to inspire people to be an independent creator, but not independent in the sense that you can be an independent creator who has some, you're reaching for something, whether it be like, I can't tell you how many friends I've had who have, after I wrote my first book in the late 90s, asked me, well, how'd you write a book? And I had to really think about that. And I'd have these 2-hour-long conversations with every friend, basically explaining how to write a book. I would explain that. Finally, I wrote it out in an essay that's actually not very long. I wrote an essay like, here's my process. Apply this. If it works for you, take these tricks. Which if anybody reaches out to me, you can go to filmthreat.com. You can click on contact. I will see that. And I will respond. I will send you this essay that I wrote, how to write a book. It's
hey, that's
long.
That's how I got a hold of you. I didn't even have your personal email. You gave it. We only met once in 35 years, way back in Ann Arbor some year.
That's right.
I had your email, but I misplaced it, and I hit your contact, and you responded.
Of course I do. I look at all that. I mean, look, I don't respond. Look, if you're asking a certain type of question about the site, I don't answer everything. But if it's directed at me, I answer it. So that's how to reach me. Just go to Film Threat, click on contact. It goes to me. If you put me, reference me in it. So, and I'll send that. I will email that essay I don't think I've ever posted it anywhere. Maybe I should just post it on Film Threat too, so people
Yeah.
can look for it. But
it's a smart thing. I'd love to read it. So Lewis Carroll says, I believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
wow. The impossible thing that concerns me, I guess this is top of mind lately, is the fact that the dystopian science fiction movies that I enjoyed in the 80s is now my current present. And I feel that I got a notification on my phone that would they like me? I even took a screenshot of it. Would you like us to track you for COVID-19 exposure? So, and I'm not a tinfoil hat person. I'm not a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
My politics are very much in the middle. I have voted for both Democrats and Republicans in the past because I like to vote for whoever I think is the best person. I tend to, when it comes to politically, I'm sort of, when it comes to raising kids and whatnot, more conservative. When it comes to social issues, very liberal. So again, there's no party for me. But I believe that the thing that shocked me is the fact that and this was revealed in this documentary, The Social Dilemma on Netflix, that now the levers exist to bend something in the favor. When you look at more and more things getting banned, look at what's being banned. Why? I'm a smart enough person that I can look at something and say, this is full of shit. This is bullshit. Because I have that, I'm become aware. I have those glasses from They Live permanently affixed as contact lenses. So I can decide for myself if I think something is bullshit. And I will say this, just within the time that I spent in media, I've heard bullshit about myself. Back when I originally moved from Michigan to California, in those early days, I'd come back and visit family and people would say stories they heard about me and it was bullshit. And I'm nobody, right? So I can't imagine what it's like to be, very famous. I'm not famous. I'm just a regular dude. But the fact that those facts were wrong, or I'd read stuff in the trades talking about the Hollywood Reporter, Variety, whatnot, the trades, and then I know the people personally involved in this project. I go, well, that's bullshit. But this is entertainment journalism, which is why when I look at politics and the way it's reported, I really feel like you need to consider sources, consider all sources, and really have those They Live glasses on, and come to your own conclusions.
Yeah, that's critical thinking. That's like fake news. Little sticker that says it's fake or not. Just develop little critical thinking skills. That's back to Louis Buñuel. He says, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it, because it's forever evolving. So, Chris, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
God, what do I worry about? Currently, because lack of sleep seems to be, although I haven't been sick this year, with the exception of that appendicitis, I haven't been sick at all this year. Really, the thing I worry about is the world, the state of the world. We're never going to accomplish anything as a people until we learn to speak to each other respectfully. And I feel like that is, if that's sort of a running thread in a documentary I'm working on separately right now, the running thread is really how are we talking to what changed in the last decade? And I will say, I think social media has been the big change. There've been a lot of other big tech things that have made us lazy.
Yeah.
But I really worry going to bed, what is the state of our future going to be? I really feel like we're developing into this thing where government is just going to do it all for me.
Yeah.
Which is going to just result in a lack of ambition for so many people. Now it's different. It's one thing. Yes, there needs to be something in place, in particular, taking care of homelessness. I mean, I have seen this city that I love, Los Angeles, just descend into horrific displays with people living on the streets. And I think that you're going to see a whole new class of homeless, and that just really is troublesome to me. I mean, most homelessness is driven by, drug addiction, or mental illness, and we're going to see a whole new class of people that just because of economic circumstances and they're going to be evicted, and this is unacceptable. I mean, it's the other two reasons are unacceptable as well. So what? So I don't see. I'm not observing. This is why this goes into my disbelief with politicians. There's got to be some other way to address that issue. So that actually bothers me, is that, oh, so those politicians are just not going to address those issues, which basically falls on us, the community, right?
Yeah.
To fix our problems. You can, it's also like when you look to the outside of yourself to fix, right? I've always been someone that's why my bookshelves are like fiction is one shelf and the other one is self-help. I read a lot of self-help stuff. And for that, because why? Because I want to fix it myself.
That is good.
Having been a homeowner in a previous life, when I used to own a home, everything cost $600 to fix. Finally, I was like, I just want to learn to fix it myself.
Yeah.
Which is why YouTube is such a great resource to, like, you know, I want to fix this thing. Like, I want to put in a new screen door. I can figure out how to do it. So I like to be self-reliant because I don't want to depend on someone else to be able to do something for me, because that in a way we're looking at this mass infantilization of our culture, right? Like it just bothers me. I was talking to a friend and he was talking about his adult daughter who was ordering Starbucks from Postmates, even though they have like one of the most expensive coffee makers you could make. So it's $30 for Starbucks, or you can just make coffee at home for 50 cents. And this is this thing of like, and she's living on unemployment, getting that boosted unemployment. And I'm just looking like, are you not thinking about like where your future, you should be saved? I don't know. See, now I'm like the old man yelling at clouds. No, I've been to. I am the physical incarnation of that meme, I guess. But it's to me, it's very obvious. But these are lessons I learned from being poor. Like I could not afford to go to the college I wanted to go to. I wanted to go to USC because I wanted to go to USC because that's where George Lucas went, and I loved Star Wars. I mean, I was like 16 years old. I wanted to go to USC, and I was a huge Star Wars fan. I wanted to go to the school that taught George Lucas, and it was, USC, no one would just say it's a school for rich kids. That's it. You got to be a rich kid to go there. Okay, so I had no chance. But what I did is on sort of a life-changing trip, my mother took us out to visit my uncle who lived in Southern California. I said, can I just go to the campus of USC? Can you take me there? I'm like 16, 17 years old. She's like, okay. I took all the money I had saved. I had like $300, and I bought every single book that I could that was part of their film program.
Nice.
Stuff in my suitcase. Now, I couldn't afford to buy all the books, so I wrote down the names of the titles and the authors of those books. When I went back, because I was going to Wayne State, I ended up going to Wayne State University. But I took that, I typed up a list of all the books for the USC film program, because I thought, well, if I can't afford the same education as these kids going to USC, I will read all of the same books that they read.
That was smart.
Well, so
you got to go back a sec because.
Okay, sorry, I'm talking too much.
One of my favorite. No, you're doing. One of my favorite jokes is the guy goes into the bookstore and says, "Where's the self-help books?" And the clerk goes, "Wouldn't that defeat the purpose?" And so then, but back to homelessness. Michael Ventura wrote for the LA Weekly, and he said some wise words. He says, one of the best things you can do to a homeless person is look them in the eye. So you're walking down the street today, you meet yourself as a 12-year-old. What would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Buy real estate.
That's the same advice Frank Zappa says. Do you have any advice for up-and-coming musicians? He goes, get a real estate license. Okay, now, Chris, how do you find peace of mind?
Wow. Okay, you're going to think this is crazy. I have discovered slow TV.
Wow.
Slow TV is videos of mundane things playing in the background. So there's this whole genre on YouTube of, you can look it up, slow TV.
Yeah.
It's someone walking on the Santa Monica Pier. There's no music. There's no narration. No one's trying to explain, oh, here's this tourist thing. It's just someone walking. Yeah. There are walking tours of almost every major city in the world. in Japan, so I will find cities I've never been to, and especially because we're still in this lockdown, I have found peace in being able to travel the world via these walking videos. They're also driving versions as well, driving along the California coast. There's no music. It's just, and I put that on in the background and I find it very calming. And I'll put one of those videos on while I'm doing some kind of mundane work, and I feel it kind of lulls me.
Yeah, no, that we've studied that genre. It goes by another name, and it's in music and film. So there's not nothing weird about that. That's utilizing. Chris, which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Oh, it's absolutely over. Over. I believe that is in the original patent.
It is. I usually tell people that is in the original patent. You know your cultural archaeology. Can you forget to die?
Can I forget to die? I hope so. It's interesting. I heard about recently when Lou Reed died, he had like a smile on his face because this was sort of to be his last experience.
Yeah.
Life is a series of all of these experiences, just that they're basically filled with emotion.
Yeah.
And the last experience we don't get to talk about it, is death and what that is. And I was actually in the room when my father passed away. It was a terrible year, 2012. Ended, a serious relationship ended then. A job that I'd had for years and that I loved ended. My father sort of spoke to him right before the holidays, and then right after the holiday, after Christmas, was get here. You need to get on a plane now. And I was in the room when he passed away, and I spoke to him. He could squeeze my hand, but he couldn't speak. And I was in the room when he passed away, and it's sort of like I knew just all my conversations with him about science fiction and whatnot, that this is something that maybe was a thought that he might have had, the same thought that Lou Reed had. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, it did well. There's a saying that goes, you create what you resist, or Bob Goldthwait morphed it into, you are what you hate. And James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And back, Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So just this idea of one creates what one resists, not specifically you, but this idea, you create what you resist. What's your take on that idea?
Well, in a way, if I look at my career, I've really resisted financial success. I almost associate that with evil, right?
Yeah.
And when I've observed my friends who have gotten a lot of money, it doesn't fix all the problems. And so I feel like when I look at, when I look back, I look at like, oh, these are the places where I shot myself in the foot, where I really should have made other choices, where I, based on some sort of conviction, threw away a relationship that might have politically benefited me. But I find it even gross that I would think that way. Whereas I see, especially in entertainment, people I would describe as climbers use me to get to a certain place. Like they're contacting me, which is why I always even with you, when you reach, like, what do you want? Like, cause I try to answer, I'm a zero inbox guy. If you contact me, I'm going to get back to you within 24 hours, like that. Right. I want nothing in my inbox. And I just cut to the chase. With publicists, I have like these canned responses to publicists. Like, I know what you want. And I give very curt responses, or I'll give you one of my canned responses. Because it's just like, give me what the action item is. Let's get to the result. And I think that what I've learned is results-oriented thinking, right? Yep. That's what I've learned. But when I look back, man, there are choices I made back then where I completely sabotaged myself. So let's just say I have learned to sabotage myself less. But ultimately, I kind of feel like I'm still in my 20s trying to figure shit out.
No, that's beautiful. That naivety reminds me of McLuhan's favorite line is, the Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can. So you're not, you don't have to strive to be a success. You just got to keep going. And actually Warhol said even better. He says, don't worry about what people think. Just keep doing it.
Right.
Just keep making your art, And so if a publisher was to come to you and say, Chris, we want to publish your autobiography, just off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Fuck Chris Gore.
That's almost as good as, another guy you must know. Matt Matt Gleason, who put out Coagula. It's like the film, the art magazine, the film threat version of art magazines in LA. He basically his book was called Most Art Sucks. And
I'm writing a book right now, which is also simultaneously being made into a documentary called Film Threat Sucks.
Oh, that's perfect.
So there's a trailer on YouTube. It's like our reel.
I thought that's what you're doing. So here, you have the book Fuck Chris Gore. They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell would it be?
It would smell like the original 1977 souvenir program guide from Star Wars, because that smell, which was a very distinct type of smell that I remember all that summer, because I've rebought it, and I remember that it would smell just like that souvenir program guide. They don't sell souvenir program guides to movies so much anymore, but that smell, like, I remember it distinctly, and I remember nothing else ever smelling like that program guide ever.
Well done. And if there's a statue built in your honor, where would you want it displayed, and what would it be made of?
Well, one, I would not like a statue of myself done. I would not, the idea of people worshiping or having a statue in some sort of form, it's just not, it makes me kind of bristle and cringe. I don't know. God,
well, what the heck? You don't want it, but just if it was made, what would it be made of, and where if you said where are you going to display?
Well, it would be made of Bakelite, just because I know what that is, and it would be in front of a movie theater. It'd be in front of a movie theater.
Good. Chris, tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Ooh.
So it's good, you never had it, but you never want it.
Oh, wow. Well, I will. Okay, this is going to sound very specific. I almost bought a house that had a pool in Toluca Lake. Through a number of reasons, like job change, we ended up having to back out of the deal. The house had a pool, and it was like not a huge house, but enough for my family at the time. My kids were small. We could afford it. Now I'll never be able to afford a home in California. And this place had a pool. And I remember being very afraid to buy this house, because I knew a guy from the magazine industry whose young 4-year-old son died in a swimming pool accident. And it haunted me. His story haunted me. It was a birthday party, and his son was in a pool, and you're not looking for 5 minutes, and that's just enough time to kill a young child. I remember that thought haunted me. It's actually the only thing, if you asked me what fear I have, I only have one fear, and that's the death of my children. That's the only thing I fear. Like, my death, stuff can happen to me. I can take it. Whatever, man. I'll survive. But that haunted me as a kid. I mean, I was in my 30s when I had a kid. Like, I just remember that thought, like, really leaving an impression. So I never got a house with a pool, and I have no regrets about it. It was probably a good thing.
It's a great answer, because I've never had it in 30 years. And the answer I get the most is fame, money, and heroin. It's something good, never had it, never want it. But a house with a pool is very specific.
Well, it's because I had nightmares about my kids dying, drowning in a pool, because I knew a guy that happened to directly. Right. And it was like, every time I saw him, all I thought about was his dead son at his birthday party, like, which is why I was probably a very protective dad in some sense, but also like, my largest disagreement with my, I don't like I don't like to use the term ex-wife. It sounds derogatory. Yeah. So I would say was that they have to let them fail. I remember one time catching her doing my daughter's project for school, and I'm like, no, let her fail. Yeah. Let her fail. Like, whenever my kids had a stomach ache, it was never a stomach ache. It's because they didn't do their homework. They didn't do something. And I was like, good, you feel like shit. You know what feels better? Not having a stomach ache. You know what feels good? Completing a project by a deadline. That's what feels good. It feels good to do that. So pain. I remember getting a discussion with a friend of mine who's religious. And his whole thing was, he would explain to his other friends who are religious, like, why does God, if God exists, why does God allow so much pain in the world? Yeah. Why? Why does God allow that? If God knows everything, why is pain allowed to even be a thing? And it's like, because pain is how you learn. Exactly. Pain is how we learn things. Failure is how we learn to be successful. Having a stomach ache as a kid, not wanting to go to school. But when you're constantly saving your child, they're not getting the lesson, which is pain sucks. Don't touch the stove. Finish your projects that are 6 weeks. You've got 6 weeks to complete. Finish those on time. Get out of an abusive relationship. Whatever the pain that is, recognize the pain and learn the lesson. Otherwise, it's like a bad video game level you can't beat.
Yeah, you really nailed this McLuhan line, but I'm going to move on because just off the top of your head, do you ever think or feel you have ESP?
Okay, here's what's weird. I don't think I have ESP. And I know this because a friend of mine was on one of those shows. Was it John Edwards or one of those? Yeah. Where, it's one of those, like, I've got the letter M. I'm feeling the letter M. Penn and Teller pointed that that's bullshit. I don't have ESP, but I will say this. I believe, and this is just from, maybe it's the writer in me or being the writer, like even though like right now I'm, and like I'm the center of attention, you ask me these questions, which I'm uncomfortable with, but happy to do for your project. But like, I am an observer. So I can meet someone and literally within minutes know so much about them.
Yeah.
I feel like the television show with Benedict Cumberbatch explained so well, Sherlock, where he'd look at someone and like, boom, 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 be able to tell, level of education, experiences, whether they have brothers and sisters. I kind of feel like I can know someone in a short period of time. In a short period of time, I will meet people, and because of some connection or they feel trusting of me, will reveal things to me they haven't revealed to people in years or maybe anybody. And I feel like I'm just able to observe things. So I don't think I have ESP, but I do believe I have a power of observation that just comes from being interested in other people. Yeah. It's like cadence in the voice or whatever. So no on the ESP, but yes, on being able to maybe guess things about a person's life or knowing almost everything about someone by knowing them for a short period of time.
Yeah. The golfer Gary Palmer said, the more you practice, the luckier you get. Because I brought it up because as soon as I figured out what was the next question, as we're some sort of coming to a close with about 2 or 3 more questions, I was going to go, oh yeah, I'll ask him this. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas? And you just like said fear. And I was like, that's a perfect lead in.
Right, so right.
Here's the next question. Chris, are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Wow. Oddly enough, I'm not afraid of either.
Yeah.
What I am concerned, what concerns me is that lessons that are not learned. Yeah. Is that when I look at like how there's been so much social upheaval of late, that we're not looking at our recent past within 100 years and at like at how quickly this change may have negative effects. I think we're seeing that clash, play out with sort of political affiliation, and how that has become so a point of division for so many. So yeah, I don't fear new ideas. I like new ideas. I just think that like the new ideas need to be combined with the old ideas, right? Like, let's look at like, hey, here's what we've learned up to this point, which is why I think this is going to sound like a very bizarre thing. I would love to be a vampire. I'd love to know. I don't think that vampires have ever been portrayed in any really interesting way, because I believe, even though I've been on this planet just over half a century, I've learned stuff. Like I've learned, like looking at politics and stuff, and I'm more chill about things, like it's just like, yeah, especially I learned that when I had my second child, like, oh, I'm going to take the lessons of the first one. I was maybe a little bit more intense. The second one, it's just like, I know how this goes, and I think that's like with everything, you got to get in your 10,000 hours on any sort of thing. But I think if you go into acceptance of new ideas without the lessons or the pre-knowledge of the old ideas, that's a bad combo. Both have value. And I think the only way we move forward is sort of including those new ideas into the DNA of what we have learned in our past.
Yeah, really well put. And I just got 3 more. Chris, you've been really articulate, and I really appreciate your time. I've learned a lot, and it's been a joy and a pleasure to meet another Michigander who's ended up in LA for all these, I got here in 80. I've been here 40 years. So this question comes from a few people. Joseph Boyes, the artist, said, make the secrets productive. Lou Welsh, a beat poet, said, guard the secrets, but constantly reveal them. But it was actually in 1928 when Thornton Wilder, the author of a great play called Our Town, said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. So it's a cute saying. It means a lot, but I'm not implying that you haven't done this. So for over 90 minutes, almost 2 hours, you've laid your cards on the table very honestly and authentically, and I appreciate that. What's it really all about for you?
Wow. Well, I think you kind of took my answer in the form of the question, which is, I think, authenticity. I mean, I will say this, because what I've learned, having done television previously and doing YouTube now, is YouTube is much more difficult, because television is about creating an artifice, right? And YouTube is revealing your authentic self to people. So I don't think that it can be appreciated how difficult that is. It's being completely honest with strangers. Now, I'm able to do that in person much easier, right? Like physical, that's why I make friends very easily. This is why I love dive bars, love to meet like interesting people. But, doing this online with strangers, it's hard for me to be that way with an audience that I haven't met. Yeah. So that's something that I think is, but I think authenticity is something that I try to be in all my relationships and with the projects that I do. And I will say it's something that I think that YouTube kind of taught me that is not as easy as it looks.
Yeah, very good. That's a really good breakdown. McLuhan says this one thing I just want to interject really quick is that when a new form or a new invention takes over the old form, like when horse and buggies were taken over by cars, then horse and buggies become an art form. So we can still use horse and buggies and have a romantic stroll through Central Park in them. So when streaming takes over Hollywood's just going to become more of an art form. And it's not that one is better than the other. It's just this constant, and it's always media archaeology. It's like we didn't get rid of pixel vision. It came out for 2 years. It's a broken kid's toy, and it's 30 years still going. So what?
I have one, by the way. I have a pixel vision camera. It's broken, but
no, we can get you to the pixel repair guy, and we even have ways to hook up your pixel camera to your cell phone. It's
sweet.
And we even have easier than that. So just a couple closing questions. I got 3 more. Thank you once again, Chris Gore. It's been an honor. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
I'd probably spit out the shit.
I've never had
that. I'm trying to think of when something like that would occur. I would just probably, I would probably lift up the vomit to wipe off the shit. How about, which is exactly what, some experiences might be akin to.
Well, see, you get that. It's all metaphor, and you get it. And the first answer I never had in my life. So in asking this question for years. And the next question is what is the healthiest cultural shift you see developing today?
Healthiest cultural shift. Oh, wow. I don't know. I don't know that it's healthy right now, to be quite frank. I feel like, at least I will say this. I would say that more I would say the championing of more diverse voices in film. I mean, which the thing is this, it's not new to me because I've been around independent film, so like that's not new. It's new that it's on a mainstream level. So that I would say is the healthiest one, is seeing someone like, say, for example, Regina King, who directed a film called One Night in Miami that's coming out, I believe, through Amazon. She's a legit director, by the way. So that is new, but it's not as if the way wasn't paid by a lot of independent filmmakers, So I feel like it's like, oh, okay, mainstream is finally caught up. So to me, it's not new, but mainstream acceptance is new. So there you go.
Chris, I hope our dialogue can go on forever, but in closing, what gives you the most optimism?
Gosh, it's been hard to be optimistic this year, so this is a difficult question. But I guess I'm optimistic that our future post this pandemic, post everything that 2020 has thrown at us, that we will have learned those lessons. We'll learn that you can't lock down people without some source of income. You just can't do it. It's unacceptable. You can't, that we need to have a dialogue with people we disagree with, that we can't other them or dehumanize them in any way. You know what I mean? So that goes for people you vehemently disagree with.
Yeah.
And I feel like you disarm them by making them a friend, or at least having some empathy and understanding. I really feel like empathy is the key. And when there's no empathy, when there's no, so my feeling is that maybe we'll get through this terrible period and look back and go, we were kind of crazy. We were working something out as a society. And we're going to look back on this period of time a couple of years from now and say, wow, it's a good thing we got past that. Yeah. Because I feel that everything is a distraction, and it's a distraction because we're never going to solve the bigger problems until we learn to work together. Otherwise, we're living in stalemate constantly, which is where we currently are.
Yeah.
So
the American Indians say your enemy is your best teacher. It's all about community, family, cooperation. It's really been an honor and a pleasure. Chris, I'm going to hit stop on mine, and then you can hit stop on yours. And could we talk for a couple more minutes?
Yeah. Okay. Well, just stay around. And I don't know why I decided to post this, but I am posting this because I've spent this past year interviewing a lot of filmmakers on the Film Threat podcast, whether you've watched them or not. And my opinion kind of leaks it a little bit, but I really make it about the film and the filmmaker. I try to, at least. And this is an opportunity for those who watch this or are listening to this to get to know me maybe a little bit more intimately, and maybe you'll hate me after this. Maybe I'll have lost people. Maybe some new people will discover what I've been trying to do with Film Threat for the last 30 plus years. But Gerry, thank you. It's great to reconnect with you. I'm gonna end this with our end credits. Here we go.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris.
All right, thank you.